Ooh, the worst at ooh, what? Oh God.
Vladimir Komarov, Soyuz 1. On April 22, 1967, Vladimir Komarov walked through the corridors of the Baikonur Cosmodrome, knowing he was likely walking to his death. The 40-year-old Soviet cosmonaut had been selected to pilot Soyuz 1, the first crewed flight of the Soviet Union's new space.
I don't have the. It's crazy that people wanted to just shoot themselves up into space without like knowing what the fuck was up, dude. Never. I mean, I get it though. Like, you know, those people in history, a lot of them were just. You had to be crazy. You got to be crazy a little bit. You know what I mean? It requires crazy people, I think.
Spacecraft designed to outpace America's Apollo program. But Komarov knew what his superiors were hiding from the public. His friend and fellow cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin had desperately tried to convince mission planners to delay the flight. Over 200 technical problems had been identified in the
Ooh.
Soyuz spacecraft during pre-flight testing,
How hard can it be? Rocket, stick, go up. You know what I mean?
including critical failures in the parachute system, unstable attitude control, and faulty heat shield bonding. Soviet engineers had submitted report after report documenting these dangerous defects, but political pressure from the Kremlin overruled safety concerns.
Political pressure
mission
from
was
the Kremlin. Name one political pressure that's ever come from the Kremlin.
scheduled to coincide with Lenin's birthday and the May Day parade, giving Communist Party leaders a propaganda victory they desperately needed. Komarov understood the impossible situation. If he refused to fly, his backup pilot, Yuri Gagarin, the first human in space and a Soviet hero, would take his place. Komarov couldn't let his friend die in a spacecraft he knew was defective. At 3:35 a.m. Moscow time on April 23rd, Soyuz 1 lifted off from Baikonur into the pre-dawn
I mean, he
darkness.
could. You know what I mean? Like, he could.
The problems began almost immediately. One of the spacecraft's two solar panels failed to deploy
Just
properly,
kidding. I would go so you don't have to.
cutting power generation in half and making it impossible to properly orient the craft toward the sun. Without adequate solar panel positioning, the spacecraft's batteries began draining rapidly. The ion sensors that controlled the craft's attitude became unreliable, causing Soyuz 1 to tumble uncontrollably through space. Komarov fought to stabilize his ship manually, using precious fuel reserves to fire the attitude control thrusters. Ground control monitored the mounting problems with growing alarm. The planned rendezvous with Soyuz 2, which was supposed to launch the next day with 3 cosmonauts aboard, was immediately canceled. After 18 increasingly desperate orbits, Mission Control ordered Komarov to attempt an emergency re-entry over the Soviet Union. As Soyuz 1 began its descent on April 24th, Komarov manually oriented his spacecraft for re-entry,
What
knowing his
happens?
life depended on systems that had already proven unreliable. The descent through the upper atmosphere proceeded normally at first, with the heat shield protecting the crew compartment as designed. But as the spacecraft slowed to subsonic speeds at an altitude of 23,000 feet, the main parachute container failed to open properly due to a design flaw that engineers had identified months earlier. The parachute became tangled
Why
within
didn't they
its
fix
container,
it?
providing virtually no drag to slow the spacecraft's descent. Komarov deployed the backup parachute system, but it immediately became twisted with the partially deployed main chute and the drogue parachute, creating a tangled mess that was completely ineffective. Soviet listening posts on the ground recorded Komarov's final transmissions as he plummeted toward Earth at over 250 miles per hour. He
Ooh.
cursed the engineers and officials who had forced him to fly in a defective spacecraft, knowing he had less than a minute to live. At 7:24 a.m., Soyuz 1 struck the ground near Orenburg with tremendous force, creating a crater and instantly igniting the spacecraft's remaining fuel. The impact was
Whoa.
so violent that the spherical descent module was completely flattened into a disk barely a meter high. Komarov's body was burned beyond recognition, fused to the twisted metal of his spacecraft. It took recovery teams hours to separate
Damn.
his remains from the wreckage. His death forced a complete overhaul of the Soviet space program,
Holy
delaying crewed
shit.
flights for 18 months while engineers redesigned the parachute system and addressed
Bro, why
hundreds
you
of
steal
other
my
safety
glasses?
issues
What the
that
fuck?
political pressure had forced them to
Hey,
ignore.
don't confuse me with those
Soyuz
engineers,
11 crew.
okay? That is
On
not
June
me,
6,
bro.
1971, Soviet cosmonauts Georgy Dobrovolsky, Vladislav Volkov, and Viktor Patsayev
You had a rough
launched
time.
aboard
I was gonna
Soyuz
say rough
11
time
from
to be
Baikonur.
Russian, but I think it's always been a rough time. Unless you're like a bad guy in a Hollywood movie, then you're an American actor pretending to be a Russian.
Cosmodrome, beginning what appeared to be a routine mission to dock with Salyut 1, the world's first operational space station. The 3 men were experienced
Russia's
spaceflight
always just not
veterans,
had a good
with
time, huh?
Dobrovolsky serving as commander, Volkov as flight engineer, and
Just get
Patsayev
your
as
shit
research
together.
engineer.
You know what I
Their
mean?
mission was to spend 3 weeks aboard the space station conducting scientific experiments and proving that humans could live and work in space for extended periods. The launch proceeded flawlessly, and 24 hours later, Soyuz 11 successfully docked with Salyut 1, making the crew the first humans to occupy a space station. For the next
Whoa.
22 days, the cosmonauts conducted a wide variety of
That's
experiments,
crazy. That would be
including
crazy to just be
astronomical
chilling up there.
observations, materials processing, biological research, and Earth photography. They established new endurance records for spaceflight duration and proved that humans could adapt to long-term weightlessness. Their daily communications with ground control were upbeat and professional, with no indication of any problems aboard the station.
Sick.
The
Okay.
crew exceeded all their planned objectives and even requested additional experiments to fill their remaining time. On June 29th, after completing their highly successful mission,
I like that they're
the
so
crew sealed
happy.
the hatches between Salyut 1 and their Soyuz 11 spacecraft and prepared for the journey home. The undocking sequence proceeded normally at 21:28 Moscow
Okay.
time, with the spacecraft separating cleanly from the space station. 40 minutes later, the crew fired their service module and
Name one bad thing that could go wrong in this situation, Chad. Only to the educated viewers and the educated bots watching.
engine for the deorbit burn, beginning their descent toward a landing site in Kazakhstan. All spacecraft systems appeared to be functioning normally as Soyuz 11 entered the upper atmosphere. The service module and orbital module separated from the descent module as planned, leaving the 3
So
cosmonauts
far, everything's
sealed
good.
inside the small spherical capsule that would carry them through re-entry and landing. The heat shield performed perfectly,
Yeah.
protecting the crew compartment from the extreme
Good
temperatures
job.
generated by atmospheric friction. The
Yeah.
drogue parachute deployed at the correct altitude, followed by the main parachute, which opened properly and slowed the spacecraft to a safe descent rate. The
Yes.
soft landing rockets fired automatically just before touchdown, cushioning the impact as Soyuz 11 settled gently onto the Kazakhstan steppe at 2:17 a.m.
Oh my
on June
God.
30th.
Could you imagine successfully making that journey? I'd getting out of there.
Recovery helicopters were already circling overhead, and ground crews rushed to the spacecraft expecting to congratulate 3 heroes who had just set a new spaceflight duration record. When the recovery team opened the hatch of the descent module, they found all 3 cosmonauts still strapped in their seats, motionless and blue-faced. There were no signs of impact trauma or fire, but the men were clearly dead. Medical examination revealed that the crew had suffocated when a pressure equalization valve had opened
Bro.
prematurely during the descent sequence, allowing the cabin atmosphere to vent into the vacuum of space. The valve was designed to equalize cabin pressure with the outside atmosphere just before landing, but it had malfunctioned and opened while the spacecraft was still above the Kármán line at an altitude of 550,000 feet. The cabin depressurized
Damn, could you imagine making it almost that, like that far?
in just 112 seconds.
Damn, my last thoughts would be like, dude, fuck, bro. You wouldn't know, I guess, because you'd knock out, right? I don't know if they know, but they knocked out. I guess that's, dude, it just sucks that everything worked so well.
Causing rapid decompression that the unprotected crew could
By the way, gamers, I would like to thank you so much for all the love and subscribers that you've been giving me. All the ad watchers, big shout out to you, ad watchers. You know who you are. Hey, bring it in, man. Come on. I appreciate it, man. All the ad blockers, what's up, guys? Chatters, lurkers, bots alike, moms, what's up? Dads, hubbies, how's it going? You pay for
not
turbo?
survive. Investigation revealed that the valve had been damaged during the separation sequence when explosive bolts fired to jettison the orbital and service modules. A bolt or piece of debris had damaged the valve mechanism, causing it to open.
Fuck
the wrong
Halo.
way.
I'm
The
never
crew had
playing that
likely
game
lost
again.
Consciousness within 15 to 20 seconds of decompression beginning and died within a minute from hypoxia.
Megs.
The tragedy led to major changes in Soviet
Thank you.
spacecraft design, including reinforced pressure valves and the requirement that crews wear pressure suits during all launch and re-entry operations, a practice that continues today. Challenger disaster, STS-51L. On the morning of January 28, 1986, Space Shuttle Challenger sat on Launch Pad 39B at Kennedy Space Center, ready for its
I always remember this. They're always like, there was a school teacher on there. There was a school teacher on there. That was the one thing I always remember they taught us. There was a school teacher on there.
10th mission into space. The crew of 7 included Commander Francis Dick Scobie, pilot Michael Smith, mission specialists Judith Resnick, Ellison Onizuka, and Ronald McNair, payload specialist Gregory Jarvis, and Krista McAuliffe, a high school teacher from New Hampshire, who had been selected as the first participant in NASA's Teacher in Space program. The launch had been delayed multiple times due to weather conditions and technical issues, creating mounting pressure from NASA management
Oh,
and the media to proceed with the mission. The
damn.
night before launch,
You know what
engineers
I
at Morton
mean?
Thiokol, the company that manufactured
Just get that rocket working, man. Just get that rocket working.
the shuttle's solid rocket boosters, discovered that overnight temperatures had dropped to 18 degrees Fahrenheit, far below the minimum temperature at which the rubber O-ring seals in the rocket boosters had been tested. Senior engineers Roger Boisjoli and Alan McDonald strongly recommended postponing the
Yo,
launch,
like the
warning that the
restaurant?
cold, stiffened O-rings might not seal properly and could allow hot gases to escape from the rocket motors. During a heated teleconference that lasted until midnight, NASA
Steve, do you
officials
see
challenged Thiokol's concerns, arguing that there was
Hmm.
no conclusive proof that cold weather would cause seal failure.
Hmm.
Under intense pressure to avoid another delay,
Yeah.
Thiokol management overruled their own engineers and gave NASA permission to proceed with the launch. At 11:38 a.m. EST, with hundreds of spectators watching, including McAuliffe's family and students from her school, Challenger lifted off into a clear blue sky. The shuttle's 3 main engines and 2 solid rocket boosters
I've seen
functioned
this.
normally during the first minute of flight,
Have you seen this?
accelerating the vehicle toward orbit. However, at 59 seconds after liftoff, high-speed cameras captured a small flame appearing near the bottom joint of the right solid rocket booster. The cold, stiffened O-rings had failed exactly as the engineers had predicted, allowing superheated
That's
gas
got to be so frustrating for the engineers. I wish. Oh, that's got to be so annoying.
at 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit to escape and
More
act
than annoying.
like a blowtorch against the external fuel tank. The flame rapidly grew larger, burning through the strut that connected the right
I saw
booster
this live when I was homesick from school. Damn. I do got some old fucking viewers. Jesus Christ. What am I, the fishing channel of Twitch? Damn,
to the
bro.
external tank and weakening the tank's structural supports. At 72 seconds into the flight, traveling at Mach 1.92 at an altitude of 48,000 feet, the compromised external tank ruptured, releasing thousands of gallons of liquid hydrogen and oxygen that mixed explosively. The massive explosion didn't kill the crew immediately. The crew compartment, built to withstand the forces of launch and re-entry, was thrown clear of the explosion.
You want me to be upset, and I'm not going to be upset. I'm done now. I don't care anymore. I've turned it off. I'm chill. I'm relaxed. I don't give a fuck about anything. I live a very fortunate life, and there's nothing that anybody or anything can do to take that away at this point. I've worked too hard. I've worked too hard for too long. I've made too many sacrifices. I've been emotionally chewed up and spat out over the course of time. And I never know when I'm going to die, and I'm only getting older. So there's nothing you can do that's going to affect me.
And began falling toward the Atlantic Ocean in a ballistic arc. Emergency oxygen systems activated automatically, and at least some of the crew members were likely conscious during the fall. Pilot Michael Smith was heard saying, "Uh-oh," just before the vehicle broke apart, indicating that the crew was aware something had gone catastrophically wrong. The crew compartment fell for 2 minutes and 45 seconds, reaching a speed of over 200 miles per hour before striking the ocean surface 18 miles offshore. The impact with the water was unsurvivable, killing all 7 crew members instantly. NASA suspended shuttle flights for 32 months, while a presidential commission investigated the accident and implemented design changes to prevent similar failures. The solid rocket boosters were completely redesigned with improved O-ring seals and joint heaters to ensure proper sealing in cold weather. Columbia disaster, STS-107.
Damn, I remember
On
this
January
one.
16th, 2003, Space
I remember
Shuttle
this
Columbia
one.
lifted off from Kennedy
Holy
Space Center,
shit.
carrying a crew of 7 astronauts on a 16-day scientific
Stay
research
safe out
mission
there. My soup's
designated
here.
STS-107. The crew included Commander Rick Husband, pilot William McCool, mission specialists Kalpana Chawla, David Brown, Laurel Clark, Michael Anderson, and payload specialist Island Ramon. The mission was dedicated to scientific research, with the crew operating over 80 experiments in a research module housed in Columbia's cargo bay. During the launch, cameras captured what appeared to be a large piece of foam insulation breaking away from the external fuel tank's bipod ramp area and striking Columbia's left wing leading edge. The impact occurred 81.7 seconds after liftoff, when the shuttle was traveling at approximately 1,568 miles per hour at an altitude of 65,000 feet. The foam piece weighed approximately 1.67 pounds and measured about 21 by 27 inches, making it much larger than typical debris that occasionally separated from the external tank. NASA engineers reviewed the high-speed film footage of the impact, but concluded that foam strikes were a common occurrence that had never caused significant damage.
Name one bad thing that could have possibly
happened. The debris
happened.
assessment team, composed of engineers
Humor
from
me.
NASA and Boeing, requested high-resolution images of Columbia's wing from military satellites or telescopes to assess the extent of any damage. However, shuttle program managers denied this request, stating that even if damage was found, nothing could be done to repair it since Columbia was not equipped for major repairs and could not reach the International Space Station. This
Yo,
decision
I got a
would
side
prove
of
fatal,
fucking
as
kimchi,
the
bro. This is my fucking $3 side of fucking kimchi, bro. Jesus Christ. That's a fucking... What the fuck, bro? I'm here being the fucking best girl in this world, bro. Like, I'm just... It's been a tough week, you know? It's been a fucking tough week. It is what it is, man. I'm thankful. I'm thankful. I'll find a fun game to play tonight. And everything will be okay. There's worse things in the world. Yeah, but that's fucked up though, to be fair. That is fucked up.
foam strike had indeed caused serious damage to the wing's thermal protection system. The impact had created a hole approximately 6
That
to
is
10
fucked
inches
up.
in
You know it
diameter
too.
in one of the reinforced carbon-carbon panels that protected the wing's leading edge during re-entry. For the next 16 days, the crew conducted their scientific experiments completely unaware that their spacecraft had been fatally damaged. They completed all planned research activities, working in shifts around the clock to maximize the scientific return from their mission. Their daily communications with mission control were routine and upbeat, with no indication that anyone suspected a problem with the shuttle. On February 1st, 2003, Columbia began its re-entry sequence over the Pacific Ocean, firing its orbital
Shit. Bro,
maneuvering
could you
system engines
imagine?
to slow down and drop out of
You're at
orbit.
the end of your
As the shuttle
fucking
descended
journey,
through
and
the
in
upper
your head, you're
atmosphere at
like,
over
yep.
17,000 miles per hour, it began encountering the first wisps of atmospheric gas that would gradually slow it down through friction. At first, the re-entry proceeded normally, with the crew following standard procedures for landing at Kennedy Space Center. However, as Columbia descended through increasingly dense atmosphere, superheated plasma began flowing through the hole in the left wing's leading edge. The temperature inside the wing structure quickly reached over 2,500 degrees
Bro.
Fahrenheit, far exceeding the
Bro.
melting point of aluminum and causing the wing's internal framework to fail. Sensors throughout the left side of the spacecraft began registering abnormal temperature readings and system failures,
Chat, be
but the
careful
crew was
out
not
there.
immediately aware of the severity of the situation. At 8:59 a.m. EST,
You guys gotta be
while
careful out
traveling over
there.
Texas at an altitude of 207,000 feet, Columbia's left wing finally separated from the fuselage due to the structural damage caused by the superheated gas intrusion. The shuttle immediately became uncontrollable and broke apart due to aerodynamic forces,
Oh,
with
shit.
debris scattered across Texas and Louisiana. The crew compartment was destroyed in the breakup, and all 7 astronauts died instantly.
God.
The accident investigation led to major changes in shuttle operations.
I wouldn't say that would be
including
one of the
detailed
worst
inspections
deaths.
of the thermal protection system on every mission and the capability to repair minor damage while in orbit. X-15, Flight 36597. On November 15, 1967, U.S. Air Force Major Michael J. Adams climbed
he
into the
died
cockpit
instantly.
of X-15-3 at Edwards Air Force Base for what would be his 7th flight in the experimental rocket plane. The 37-year-old test pilot had been selected for the X-15 program based on his exceptional skills flying high-performance aircraft, and he was being considered for NASA's Astronaut Corps.
What could possibly
The
go wrong?
X-15 was designed to explore the boundary between atmospheric flight and spaceflight, reaching altitudes above 50 miles where conventional aircraft could not operate. Adams's mission, designated Flight 36597, called for him to reach an altitude of 250,000 feet while testing a new ultraviolet stellar photography experiment.
That's pretty
and
high up.
evaluating the aircraft's reaction controls in the near vacuum of
Yep.
space. The flight plan seemed routine by X-15 standards, but several factors would combine to create a deadly situation. At 10:30 a.m., Adams' X-15 was released from the wing of a modified B-52 bomber at 45,000 feet over the Mojave Desert. He immediately ignited the XLR-99 rocket engine, which produced 57,000 pounds of thrust and accelerated the aircraft to over 3,800 miles per hour. As the X-15 climbed steeply through the atmosphere, Adams reported normal engine performance and aircraft handling. The rocket plane reached its planned altitude of 266,000 feet, officially entering space, and making Adams the first person to die during a spaceflight. However, during the high-altitude portion of the flight, something went wrong with the aircraft's attitude control system. The X-15
It's
began
always
an
the attitude
inadvertent
control
yaw motion
system.
that Adams initially didn't recognize
Fuck.
because the thin atmosphere at that altitude
Chat,
provided almost no aerodynamic
you guys
feedback.
got to be
The
careful out there.
spacecraft's reaction control system,
I'm not even
designed to
joking.
provide control in space, was not functioning properly, and Adams found himself in a slowly developing emergency that would prove fatal. As the X-15 began its descent back into the atmosphere, the yaw motion became more pronounced, causing the aircraft to enter a spin. Adams attempted to correct the problem using the aircraft's conventional aerodynamic controls, but at such high altitude and speed, they were largely ineffective. Ground
We call that the
controllers
cock.
at Edwards Air Force Base tracked the aircraft's erratic flight path on radar and tried to provide guidance, but communications were intermittent due to the plasma sheath surrounding the hypersonic aircraft. As the X-15 descended through 200,000 feet, it began encountering thicker atmosphere, which should have allowed Adams to regain control using conventional flight controls. However, the aircraft's angle of attack had become so extreme that it was essentially flying sideways through the air at over 3,000 miles per hour.
Bro.
The aerodynamic forces on the aircraft were enormous and increasing rapidly as it entered denser air. At approximately 65,000 feet altitude, while traveling at Mach 3.5, the X-15 encountered G-forces that exceeded the structural limits
black
of
out.
both the aircraft and the
Personally?
human body. The aircraft began to break apart under the extreme aerodynamic loads, with pieces separating from the main fuselage.
Fuck.
Adams, subjected to forces exceeding 15 Gs, likely lost consciousness before the aircraft's final breakup. The main wreckage of X-15-3 impacted the ground near Johannesburg, California, creating a crater several feet deep. Adams's body was found still strapped in his ejection seat, but the seat had never been activated. Investigation revealed that the aircraft's adaptive flight control system had malfunctioned during the high-altitude portion of the flight, initiating the yaw motion that Adams was unable to correct. The tragedy led to improvements in pilot
that is not good.
training for high-altitude flight
That is
and
sad.
better backup control systems for spacecraft operating at the edge of the atmosphere. Adams was posthumously awarded astronaut wings for his flight, becoming the first person to earn them by dying in space. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe
That
for
was
similar
fucking
ones and feel
wild,
free to drop
son.
suggestions for the next video
Oh
in the
my god,
comments.
those are horrible. I'm following this channel. Holy shit.